Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yah Radio. My pleasure to be with you this evening. We're here with Kirk and Dee. We were talking before the show about Israel, and it's always been a fascination as to what is going to occur in Israel that is going to make the nation such easy prey for the Muslim assault that is to come. It's been obvious when you read through the prophets, particularly through Yada Yah, that Islamic jihadists are going to flood into Israel after Israel accepts is really too soft a word. I think it will be forced on her, but accepts the two-state solution, or as I call it, the final solution to the Jewish problem, where the Palestinians will be given territory that narrows Israel at its waist to an undefensible degree, and the nation will be flooded with jihadists and with rockets, both flowing into Israel faster than either the Iron Dome or bullets can stop them. And this is inevitable, unfortunately. But one of the things that was hard to foresee is that Israel would self-destruct. And that's exactly what we're witnessing. Israel is not only self-destructing, but there is no solution.
Right.
It was a combination of blunders. The left in Israel was essentially done. The progressives only got one party to even have enough seats to be considered part of the Knesset. At the last election, the left unraveled. So you would say, wow, okay, you've got a conservative right-wing government. They have way over the threshold number. They can form a coalition. Unfortunately, we know that Netanyahu forms this coalition with the most irrational and useless people on the planet, the Haredim.
Yes.
And because they are breeding like rabbits and they are completely dependent upon government subsidies, the Haredim are very demanding. And so in their coalition negotiations after the election, they demanded, the Haredim, for example, demanded that A, they have judicial reform, and B, that a new draft law be proposed, because the previous draft law keeping the Haredim essentially out of the IDF was overturned by the High Court. And so the Haredim came out this past week and said that if Netanyahu does not bring up for a vote a new Haredim draft extension or exemption, then they're going to leave the government. And at the same time, Ben-Gvir, who has got to be I don't know, it's a contest in Israel as to who the most divisive character is, whether it's Lapid leading the progressives or Ben-Gvir leading the wackos. But both have taken a real beating in the polls, because the more they're exposed, the more it's obvious that neither have the intelligence of a gnat. But Ben-Gvir also said that he's going to leave the government if he's not included in security meetings. He denounced the government's response to the last series of rockets attacks from Gaza. Netanyahu does nothing. The only chance that Netanyahu has, and it's a slim one, is to round up all of his religious wackos in a room and say, here's the scoop, boys. To form this government, it's true that I promised you the sun, moon, and the stars. We can't deliver the sun, moon, and the stars to you anymore, because the way we went at judicial reform, which is necessary for Israel's survival, is selfish. Dur wanted to be have two minister positions, demanded them, and yet he is a ex-con, and he's precluded. So you wanted us to change the judiciary such that ex-criminals or ex-felons, if you want to use the American term, can come back into public office and steal. So we did that, and it got thrown back in our face because you demanded it. And then we decided we would change the graft laws, and we went after judicial reform in such a stupid way to try to accommodate all of your idiotic wishes that the thing that we actually needed, which was a Bill of Rights and a reasonable way to appoint judges and limiting the High Court to ruling on that Bill of Rights, has been squandered. And we've turned the left, which was denounced at the last elections, into a formidable force that is tearing the country apart. So, Likud is so unpopular now, and the other members of the coalition are so unpopular now, that if elections were held today, they would lose about 25% of the votes that they had previously, and you'd have a center-left government. And it's amazing that the wackos that comprise Netanyahu's government aren't smart enough to realize if we continue to push this, there's going to be one of two outcomes: civil war, or we are going to withdraw from this government, and we're going to lose power forevermore. That all the things we're demanding, we won't even get to sniff at if we bring down this government. And there you are, and who would have thought that Israel would fall apart at the seams, that she would be a house divided against herself? Well, I guess most people would. All you got to do is read the Torah and listen to how Jews responded during the 40 years through the wilderness, particularly as they reached the waters of Meribah. It is what is happening all over again. So it is sad, and I don't see a solution because the left feels empowered with their disrupt the government protests. The left, particularly gays, which are a high percentage of the progressives in Tel Aviv. I think Tel Aviv is the most gay, homosexual city in the world. Well over 25% of the population is gay in Tel Aviv. They love to congregate and fling their flags around, and they've been fed a bunch of lies. All of their slogans are the opposite of what's true. There's no reasoning with them. You're not going to put the jar back on that and have it simmer down because they're too full of themselves at this point. Nothing will happen until they bring down the government, and Israel will break apart at the seams. So that's where we are.
Pretty scary. Yeah.
It is indeed scary. As an update as to where we are in our rewrites of the, I think, close to 30 books that are on the shelves at Yada Yah, this time last week I told you we had finished the rewrite of Babel 1, 2, and 3. The rewrites are necessary because of what we have learned about Dowd. We're reading that in the 22nd Psalm now, but it's everywhere. In fact, as I'm doing the 20th Psalm now for Volume 1 of Coming Home, which I'm about halfway through now in the rewrite, it says it in no uncertain terms that, I'm going to save my people through the Messiah. It's going to be the feminine aspect of the Gabora, the most competent and courageous individual. His only feminine aspect would be his soul. that I'm going to use to save my people. We're going to celebrate this because we're in complete agreement with his judgment in this regard. And it just goes on and on. It says, my response to my people is going to be through the soul of Dowd. How we missed it, I mean, I know how we missed it. We came to the conclusion that Yahowah provided his nepesh and a nondescript individual to fulfill Pesach and Matzah in year 4000 Yah, and we afforded Yahowah saving his people through his nepesh soul as under the name of Yosha, and explained it that way. Because it was really hard to fathom that Dowd would volunteer. You know, when you read about Dowd, you read about wonderfully heroic things and terribly tragic decisions. He was equal intellect and emotion. When it came to the things of God, he was right all the time. When it comes to the things of men, he was wrong most of the time. And so you have this conflicted character, and that is not the character you would expect would volunteer for this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to imagine a father saying to his son, sure, I'm going to allow you to suffer under the dastardly Romans and suffer crucifixion as the Passover lamb, and then I'm going to allow your soul to go into Sheol to fulfill matzah. Hard to imagine God allowing his beloved son to endure that. But once you understand that Dowd recognized he had no choice. I mean, it was this was the only way to redeem his reputation, the only way to serve as Yisrael's king. I mean, Moshe couldn't lead them, and Moshe was the most exemplary character probably in world history. So right. Dowd recognized that he had to do something to reclaim respect of his people, and this was the way to achieve it. 2 days in hell for an eternity of respect. That's a sound decision, and Yahowah knew it, and he allowed his son to do it. But every place you read, every place, it is the same story. It's repeated over and over and over again. In fact, every prophecy pertaining to the fulfillment of the Moed, the salvation of Yisra'el, both in year 4000 Yah, which is 33 CE, with the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, and Shabuah, and then in year 6000 Yah, with the upcoming fulfillment in 2033 of Kappurim and Sukkah, there's only one man's name and one title that is used. Mm-hmm. Dowd's name and Dowd's titles. That's it.
Right.
No other person is ever mentioned. And, you know, here we're studying the 22nd Mizmowr, and it's written in first person by Dowd because he endured it. So it's going to be a while we work our way all the way through the material, but it's probably the most rewarding change, because with this change, everything fits back into its proper place all the way along from beginning to end. One of the things that I promised that I would do this evening is we're going to backtrack just a little bit to where we were prior to the completion of the last program, which was we were reading Dowd saying that he was going to experience death of this physical body by having his hands and feet pierced. It's right. Mizmowr Psalm 22:16. It reads, "For indeed the contemptible scum and abased yelpers have surrounded me." A politicized religious community providing testimony of the disastrously corrupt establishes a destructive annual cycle to denigrate what I'm doing. Now you can call that, whether it's the Christian Christmas and Easter, where their baby God is born, and then God dies and is bodily resurrected, or it's the annual cycles now in Judaism, which have no concept of what Dowd did to fulfill Pesach. They've essentially written matzah out of their annual cycle of events. They do not celebrate Bikurim, and so they've come up with an annual cycle that has no bearing on what Dowd accomplished and denigrate it. Then it reads, they bore into piercing my hands and feet. Mizmowr song 22:16. The Masoretic says, they like a lion are my hands and feet. But a modicum of research shows that that was changed by rabbis specifically because they didn't want it to be acknowledged that Pesach had been predicted, the fulfillment of Pesach had been predicted and fulfilled via Roman crucifixion. It was done to thwart that other religion, as opposed to being sensible and saying, wait a minute, this is what God predicted was going to occur, but it was Dowd who was going to endure it. We can overcome Christianity by coming up with the correct participant.
It's incredible in the verse that Dowd's writing about this conspiracy is the conspiracy, literally in the same verse. It just blows my mind.
Yes. As he's talking about what's happening to him, his complaint is, they have this annual conspiracy now against me, having turned what I did into this annual festival of stupidness.
Cycle, yeah.
The thing that would have been is so insightful as it speaks to piercing my hands and feet is what Yahowah reveals in first person when he is speaking to the second to the last of the prophets, Zakaryah. And this would have been troublesome for the conclusion that Dowd, speaking in first person, and the 22nd Mizmowr was speaking of himself, because it's typically translated that they will look upon me who they pierced. But that's not what the words actually say. And the problem with that, even if you were to go there with a misappropriation of the words, the entire rest of the statement is about mourning over a firstborn. Well, the Mizmowr, go read Mizmowr 89.
There's a clue.
Yahowah is explicit that Dowd is his firstborn. So if they're mourning over a firstborn, who are they mourning over?
Only one could be Dowd.
Yeah. And so this is Zechariah from the 12th chapter, and it reads, for a time, that means that it is written in the perfect, for a time, I will pour out upon the house of Dowd. Once again, every time there is a prophecy pertaining to the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, Shavuot, Teruah, Kapporim, or Sukkah, either in year 4,000 Yah or 6,000 Yah, 33 CE or 2033. Every single one of them, without exception, mentions either Dowd's name or one of his titles or both. And for a time I will pour out upon the house of Dowd and upon those who dwell in Jerusalem a spirit of compassion and acceptance for those requesting mercy and clemency. So how is he providing mercy and clemency and compassion? Next line. Then they will look to me. Wa Nabat, in the third person, they, at this time, will be equipped to observe, focus upon, pay attention to, regard, think about, and then appropriately respond to me, Elani. Eth Asher, accompanied by the one who they had reviled and pierced. Zakar. And they will lament over him, just like one cries over the most uniquely special child and valued life. Anguished and infuriated over him, consistent with the anguish suffered over the firstborn. It's Dowd. It's obvious it's Dowd. There's no other option but Dowd. And this child who was given, and Yada Yah, a son who was given, a child who was born, and Yada Yah 9 is, well, it lists Dowd's name, conveys his title, clearly speaking of Dowd. And throughout the Mizmowr, Yahweh says, he is my son. And he says he's going to be born in the normal way. He had 3 lives among his people. You know, it's obvious all along that God said he's coming, bringing Dowd back. That's 2. Well, he was anointed 3 times. He has 3 lives among his people. This is speaking of the remnant of Yisra'el, who is now recognizing Yahweh upon his return, has the spirit of acceptance that's been poured out upon them. And they're seeing him with Dowd, whom they pierced, and crying. And not just crying because they had done this to him, because that's the small part. That's 2 days of agonizing. No, they're crying over 2,000 years of denying it. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than allowing yourself, volunteering to be crucified as the Passover lamb, and then have your soul take everybody else's guilt into Sheol to deposit it there. And once you've endured and volunteered for the most heroic and compassionate act in human history, everyone spits in your face. That's what they're crying about. A stunning revelation. Anyway, God and King, Father and Son are returning to Jerusalem, the source of guidance on reconciliation. They will do so one final time on Yom Kippurim. It is the day of reconciliations, not of afflictions. Look up the word upon which kappôreth is based. It is plural because it's not only the reconciliation of Yahweh with his people, but also the reconciliation of his people, something that clearly they cannot achieve on their own. And if you want to know just a little bit about what's going to happen on that day, the prophet Zechariah is really quite expressive about this, that Dowd is going to anoint the mercy seat, which is called a kappôreth, based upon the same word of kapporim. The kappôreth is the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And to reconcile the people once a year, it's anointed with blood to so that the people's iniquity can be annulled and overlooked, and reconciliation is possible. And that is what he's going to do on the day of reconciliations. And as a result, the remnant of Yisra'el will endure forevermore with Yahweh. And this is all going to occur on Yom Kippurim, sunset, 6:22 p.m., October 2nd, 2033, which is year 6000 Yah. Should you be Jewish and you think, no, it's not, we're in a year 5-7 something, no, you're not. To believe Maimonides' numbering system is to be played for an idiot. Maimonides was not a very sharp man. And rather than going through the Torah and the genealogies in the Torah and the timeline that Yahweh provides through it, which, Dee, you've done with Jackie and come up with a very succinct timeline. Mike has also done it independently and come up with a timeline. It's not difficult to do, but that's not what Maimonides did. No, he liked new moons and the number 19. The number 19 is the revered number in Islam. He was, of course, the advisor, vizier to Saladin. So he did like his Islam, and he based it on the dumbest criteria you can imagine that has nothing to do with God. And for all of this time, Jews have been played for fools regarding the timing of what occurred. But if you go back through the timeline intelligently, you find that in 3968 BCE, year 1, if you will, is when Adam and Sheol were kicked out of the garden. 40 Yobel later is when the means for us to re-enter the garden was provided by the affirmation of the covenant on Mount Moriah. That'd be 1968 BCE. It's year 2000 Yah. So Abraham and Yitzhak on Passover are on Mount Moriah, and they're affirming the conditions and benefits of the covenant, where Yahowah says, I'm going to provide the lamb. Don't take your son. I'm going to give you mine. And so we have 40 Yobel thereafter, which is 33 CE. There's no year zero in the transition from the imperial Roman, the Julian calendar, between years, or as particularly as it became the Roman Catholic calendar, between BC and what they now call AD. So that's 33 CE. We can affirm 33 CE through the prophecy in Daniel 9, where Gabriel, who happens to be from Gabor, and El, the courageous and competent man of God, who is Dowd, reveals that he will come to be cut off, but not for himself, as the Mashiach, of which he was, in Jerusalem, and he gives you the exact date that he is going to enter the city, which was 4 days before Passover in 33 CE, which is year 4000 Yah, 20 Yobel exactly, from the time of the dress rehearsal for this event with Abraham and Yitzhak on Mount Moriah. So it's not difficult to put these pieces together so that you would know from that date, which is set firmly by Dowd himself and Daniel 9, to what's going to happen in 40 Yobel from that time, which would be 2033. Soon we will post on the Yada Yah site a comprehensive timeline from beginning to end that, in particular, Jackie and Dee have been working on for quite a while. So, for the first time in 3,480 years since the children of Yisra'el, when gathered around Mount Horeb, said that they did not want to see or hear from Yahowah again, a select few will be prepared and they will be ready to hear and see Yahowah. The synthesis of Dowd's devotion will look up to see Yahowah accompanied by his son. They will be together. Father will be very proud of what his son has done, and the remnant of Yisra'el will be exceedingly joyous to see Yahowah return, and then suddenly saddened that they had denied his son disrespect for all of this time. God will be accompanied by one of Yisrael's reviled, and the one that Yisra'el reviled, and the one that Rome pierced. And this is as it should be, since we did not crucify God, but instead the one most beloved by him. Recognize the benefits that he was providing and how inappropriately people have responded to him. Everyone gathered before Father and Son on this day are going to be genuinely sorry that it came to this. The reaction will be bittersweet, but initially more weeping than shrieking. You know, it's hard to imagine looking upon Father and Son and realizing what they have done, only to add insult to injury by failing to appreciate his gift for 2,000 to 3,000 years. Dowd wrote about it 3,000 years ago. He enacted it 2,000 years ago, and there isn't a religious Jew, maybe no Jew, up until just recently when we figured this out and began proclaiming it, that credits Dowd for having fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim.
Yeah, it's true.
In fact, religiously, Jews don't even think they've been fulfilled.
Nope.
In fact, religiously, they don't even know what Matzah and Bikurim represent.
Right. You know, it's interesting here in Zechariah 12, verse 10 that you just read, the word maror, they will mourn over him, the firstborn, and it just takes you right back to Mitzrayim, and the firstborn, and the bitterness of the storyline. Like you said, they don't understand. These elements are all tied together and linked to Dowd.
Yeah, it doesn't really, you don't have to be particularly bright to get it, because Yahowah
Not if I can.
declares vociferously that Dowd is his firstborn, Bukor. Of course, then that means that Dowd was the only one that really could have filled Bukurim, which is firstborn children, which is the result of Pesach and Matzah for all of us in the covenant. And so when Yahowah not only states this through the 89th Mizmowr, but says, if it's not true, what I'm saying of Dowd, then you can call me a liar. Yeah. Imagine God saying that. That's how frustrated God is with his people. What he's really saying is, you're calling me a liar.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Dowd's initial life among us was 3,000 years ago. It was the most amazing in human history. He was the consummate poet and lyricist, a shepherd and king, father of his nation, and son of God. A prolific prophet and a heroic defender of his people. His life was so tumultuous. He represented the best and worst of Israel. But his relationship with Yahowah, he became the exemplar of the covenant because it was always right. And yet, sadly, most of what he came to represent was stolen from him to legitimize religions that he has already condemned. He condemned those religions over 1,000 years before they were born. I was reading something on a Jewish site the other day, and it was talking about rabbi, and they were trying to explain, why doesn't the Torah speak of rabbis? Well, because there were no rabbis until the first century CE, and the reason that rabbis emerged is that somebody needed to explain away what was happening in this new emerging Roman cult called Christianity, and the rabbis came onto the scene, and they decided they would be the ones to explain it away, with Rabbi Akiba being first among them. It's amazing to credit Rabbi Akiba to be the father of your religion when he's the man who foisted a false Messiah to try to divert attention from the false Messiah in Jesus Christ. I guess if you have two false messiahs, there's some confusion. But by foisting that false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, he brought the wrath of Rome on his people, caused the land to be renamed, and his people to be hauled away in slavery during the diaspora, leading to the Holocaust. And that's the dude you credit with being the father of your religion. There is something really, really sick about that. But as I was reading on rabbis, and of course, you know, they say the first century is the first mention of rabbi. They say that, the first rabbi was Moshe.
Oh no!
The religious Moshe, right?
Yes, Moshe. Yeah. How these idiots say stuff like that? Wow.
They don't read the Torah.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
There's no place to check it if you don't read the Torah.
No worse than worshiping a dead god on a stick.
Yeah.
Exceedingly sad is the answer to all of this. Dowd's second coming 2,000 years ago was the most compassionate and magnanimous offering in the long history of humankind. He volunteered to have his soul sent down from heaven and placed in a rather ordinary body to serve as the Passover lamb to open the doorway for his people to come home. I have been translating the first 5 Mizmowr and then jumped ahead to 103 and then 20. It's interesting that in Mizmowr 103, Dowd begins it by saying, the hero of this story is my nepesh, my soul. And it's my soul that is enduring all of this for you. And it is just profound about Dowd admitting that the way that he was able to fulfill Pesach Matzah Bakurim was because Yahowah deployed his nepesh soul to do so. Nepesh, by the way, is a feminine noun. So then you turn to the 20th Mizmowr, and God is explaining, he says, listen, it's through my Messiah that I'm going to respond to my people. We're going to celebrate their salvation through the Messiah when I bring him out of heaven. Not out of Israel, out of heaven, my Messiah. We're going to celebrate salvation with my Messiah, and we're going to do so through the Gabora. Well, Gabor is one of Dowd's most important titles. It means capable and courageous man of God. Gabora
at the end
is feminine. So what aspect of Dowd is feminine of the Messiah that's going to come and save his people? His soul.
Soul.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It is so vividly explained. So when Dowd came out of heaven and his soul was put into a regular, ordinary body to serve as the Passover lamb, it opened the doorway for his people to come home. And then he carried the guilt of the covenant family into Sheol, depositing it there so that we might be perfected and live with him and his Father forevermore. He wrote openly, he wrote graphically of all of it. And then he endured much of it in the sight of his people. And yet no one has credited him with the most heroic and compassionate act in human history. Worse, his people denied the Mikra were even fulfilled, while the Goyim attributed his sacrifice to a figment of their imagination, damning Jews for killing their mythical God in the process. The 22nd Mizmowr was written during Dowd's initial life, about his second coming. Now, it's hard to imagine what was going through his mind at the time.
No joke.
Yeah.
Did I really volunteer for this?
Think about it just a little while longer.
Yeah.
Have a drink. Let's talk about it.
Do we have a plan B on the? No, actually, you read Dowd's personality. He's not the kind of when it comes to defending his people, dude had backbone and character. This is
give me some rocks.
This is pure. Yeah, this is give me a stone. I'll pick up 6. I don't know why, but we'll
Okay, go on, knock off a few more.
It'll just take one. So with Zechariah 12, we come full circle. The Bakor firstborn during his life as the king of Yisra'el is projected through his second coming as he was pierced for his people's redemption, and then into his third arrival as he returns as king of the universe with his Father who created it. Those who rejected him now embrace him, and those who disavowed his Father are now in his company. Just as there are 3 40-bell epochs of 2,000 years between our expulsion from the garden and our return to it, courtesy of Father and Son, the Messiah will have been here 3 times over the past 3,000 years. He showed us the way home, made it possible for us to go home, and will be there to greet us when we arrive home.
Pretty extraordinary. That's extraordinary.
On the day of reconciliations, as the sun sets to a new dawn on October 2nd, in the Yobel year is times that debts are forgiven, all slaves are freed, and the land is returned to its rightful owners. Of 2033, that's year 6,000 Yah, Father and Son will return to Jerusalem as a reconciled Yisra'el and covenant family look up with tear-filled eyes, recognizing what actually occurred on the Passover Dowd is witnessing and enduring. Now, returning to Golgotha on this day, Pesach, in the Yobel of 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, we find that Dowd predicted, "I can count all of my bones. They themselves stare as they look right through me." That's Mizmowr, Psalm 22:17. Romans were savages. Their bloodlust was partially moderated by breaking the legs of crucifixion victims so that they would be unable to free their diaphragm. Once the capacity to push up against the nails that had been driven through the ankles was curtailed, just think of the pain of that, was curtailed by broken fibulas, it effectively eliminated the ability to draw air into the lungs and breathe. While this sounds cruel, it was actually done to expedite death, shortening the duration of the agony from days to hours. This was especially relevant when the gruesome specter of crucifixion was visible to the religious pilgrims in Jerusalem for Passover. It's hard to observe the Shabat when one's view of the sunset is interrupted by the sight of religious and political leaders torturing the Passover lamb.
Well, what a line.
But I tell you one thing, though, that this does do is there was no in the stupid Christian New Testament. They've got 4 entirely different accounts as to what happened before Pontius Pilate. None of them make any sense. They don't even harmonize with each other. So they end up blaming Jews for conspiring against their Jebus. And that it was the Jews that convinced Pontius Pilate, to the Roman authority and over Judea at the time, to crucify him. Well, little study of history. I'm sure you've done it, Kirk, because you like this kind of stuff. Little study of history. The religious community in Israel had written Nero letters saying Pontius Pilate's got to go because he has no concern for, won't listen to, will not tolerate the religious community in Judea. He despised them. They would no more go to him and ask for a favor than the man on the moon. He would no more entertain them in terms of who Rome should or should not crucify than if they had been from Mars. They were not on speaking terms. It could not have happened that way. Plus, Rome was not in the business of terrorizing meaningless individuals. If you believe the Christian story, you got this guy, and he's got some followers, and he turned some water into wine, and he took a bath in the Jordan River, and he tells really charming stories, and he's just going out about his business. He doesn't tell anybody he's got any kind of fancy title. He doesn't have an army. He's not planning an insurrection. There is a 0% chance they're going to crucify him. The only reason that Rome would have crucified someone, which they did to Dowd, is for that person to say that they are a king, that this is their country.
Yeah, that's a death.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So you either have to commit a horrendous crime against a Roman, which obviously neither did, or, well, the myth, it's really hard to have a myth create a crime.
Claim your king. Sure.
Or you admit sedition, that you are royalty, and you're not their royalty. So that'll get you straight to death. Dowd was king of Israel. Jews were looking for a messianic figure. Dowd is the Messiah. That either one of those two would have sent him right to his death. And so the Romans were doing their thing according to their rules. Now, the reason that Dowd's legs were not broken is that he had been whipped to the precipice of death prior to being crucified. So his body would succumb in a timely fashion without his bones being broken. The second part of this prophetic pronouncement suggests that even with all that he had written of his sacrifice on behalf of his people, they nonetheless stared right past him. They looked right through him, unable to fathom what was occurring before their eyes. They have continued to do so for 2,000 years. Now, since words paint pictures, it is especially relevant to know that the body, which Dowd's soul was residing, was not hung on a cross on a hill far away, as the Christian hymn suggests.
Mm-hmm.
Romans crucified their victims along major roadways. But they did. It was more humiliating and served as a deterrent. You're not going to kill somebody with all of the apparatus of crucifixion unless you're going to get something from it, and terrorizing the people would do it. Golgotha, the place of the skull, is just outside the Damascus gate and sits directly between what was the summit of Mount Moriah during Abraham's day and the Temple Mount. Portions of the mountain were carved away to enlarge the Temple Mount and bolster the city's walls. The place of the skull faces the main road leading north out of town. Today, that site of the crucifixion is the back parking lot of the Jerusalem bus station. I think I've shared this before. The only artifact that I've ever treasured, and it's sitting right behind my desk here, is a piece of limestone I gathered from this place. In all likelihood, the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, I think, lies directly beneath protected in Yirmiya's grotto.
It's quite logical, yeah.
Yeah, there is no reason for the Passover lamb's blood to drip upon that mercy seat, but there is a reason to have Dowd's blood drip upon the mercy seat, anointed anyway, because Dowd will be the one who will return to anoint the mercy seat on Yom Kippur. Mm-hmm. Now, the implement of death onto which Dowd was nailed did not look like a Christian cross in form. In fact, the Greek word used to describe it is stauros, which means upright pole. The vertical post was set and left in a recess into the limestone rock. There was no way somebody could, as the Christian New Testament says so stupidly, pick up your cross and follow me. What a morbid idea. But there were no crosses like that. None. The upright post stayed in the ground. All the victim could carry would have been the horizontal component of the apparatus. But that piece was set right on top of the pole. It would look like a capital T, not the Christian cross design. All that said, I would like to propose a different interpretation of this declaration. I think that Dowd may have been drawing our attention to the corporeal nature of the Passover lamb with shofar kol estimoth, revealing that this accounting for the record was entirely physical. Neither his soul nor Yahweh's spirit would die, just his body, serving as the Pesach El. Estem means bones, it means physical skeleton, the essence of one's body, their corporeal nature is estem. The oath ending means all things related to one's corporeal nature. And so it was all things related to his corporeal nature which would die. His body, not his soul. Providing fodder to comprise the Christian New Testament, we find Dowd revealing, "They divide my garments among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." Dowd was pointing, I should say, something out that's quite profound. He was making it possible for us to live forever as part of Yahweh's family, inheriting all that is God's to offer. And the Romans were looking down, playing with pebbles to determine who could steal his dirty, blood-stained laundry. And while this no doubt occurred and was relevant for the reason I've shared, Christians have misappropriated it to prop up their faith. Mm-hmm. Without any corroborating evidence, they postulate that their Jesus fulfilled another prophecy, or at least the Romans had done so. And while it proved nothing other than Christian desperation, there is a serious problem with the gospel attestation. This was written in first person by the most famous of Jews, most assuredly not by Jesus. It said, "For my clothing." My means my, not his. But alas, if these Romans had been Roman Catholics, they would have scooped up his apparel, designated his robe as a holy relic, and then erected a lavish shrine that the faithful could worship it while collecting a robust visitor's fee. With Dowd's last words on the upright pole, Yahweh's spirit departed, leaving the soul of the Passover lamb to bear the guilt of every covenant member. He pleads, "But you, Yahweh, you will not be far away for a prolonged and protracted period of time. Lo, Rakach, you will not continually disassociate yourself from me." That was his assurance. So this prophetic statement offers two things. During Matzah, Yahweh and Dowd would be separated from one another. So when it says you will not be far away for a protracted period of time, it does mean that you are going to be far away for a period of time. So Dowd's soul and Yahweh's spirit would be separated. It's just that since Rakach was both negated and inscribed in the imperfect conjugation, if you're negating the ongoing aspect of the imperfect, it means that this would not occur over a prolonged period. And it didn't. It was 24 hours. It also provides the set-apart spirit with a descriptive title. ʕyâlûth is feminine plural of Yal, one who assists and helps, one who empowers and strengthens. My ʕyâlûth.
Beautiful.
my source of strength and help. ৄ'lûth ani is one who empowers and assists me, she who provides aid, making me effective and influential. The feminine form of Эyâl, which is the strength, fortitude, and ability of the ram, opening the doorway. My Œyâlûth, my source of strength and help, it is my desire and your decision, my choice and your will to act quickly, hastening the process, rapidly rushing in with a minimal passage of time to assist in my rescue by supporting me. Dowd is not asking that the torment of crucifixion, the most agonizing form of death ever conceived by repulsive humans, worse than even the torture implements of the Roman Catholic Church. He did not say, I want that agony to be as short-lived as possible. No, it's the separation from Yahowah that he wanted to be limited in time. He's not saying don't allow it to happen, because he knows that that is how he is saving his people. He is taking the collective guilt of every covenant member and of all Yisra'el and carrying it with him into Sheol, where he is going to deposit it. What he's saying is, just don't leave me there. And I mean, he understood the timing of it, but clearly time is not going to flow in a normal manner when there. And so he's
feel like forever.
telling the Spirit that it's my desire and your decision. Let's go over this. This is our playbook again. This is what we've agreed to. My desire, your decision, my choice, your will to act quickly, hastening the process, rapidly rushing in with a minimum of passage of time to assist me and rescue by supporting me. No one had ever escaped Sheol.
This had to have been a huge deal.
Oh,
I can't even understand it.
Yeah. Well, he understood it because he's there in heaven talking about it, too.
Yeah, but I can't wrap my brain around how you come out of a black hole. It's incredible.
I have wondered when and how Dowd wrote this. So Dowd had to write it during his first life, which is before he experienced it. But he is a prophet, and Yahowah took him forward in time to experience what he was going to experience so he could go back in time to talk about it. But it is, so I don't think this was written in heaven. I think this was written while Dowd was alive during his first life, around that ended right around 968 BCE. That's so sometime prior to that is when this was written.
Yeah.
And so he was able to witness every aspect of this from beginning to end prior to it occurring. That's the whole nature of prophecy and time and of Yah's ability as a spiritual being to experience any moment in time at any point that he wishes. He can maneuver in time and is not trapped in its ordinary flow. And with his prophets, of Dowd was one, he's able to do this. So my guess is that both of you have checked ৄ'lûth out and come to some conclusions.
I have. I don't know about you, Kirk.
No, go ahead. It's everything it says there.
It is everything it says, but when I first read it, actually a couple of years ago, you had translated this passage, and it really stood out to me then. I don't have any incredible insights to offer outside of what you shared, but I just love how it's the feminine of the Io ram. It's, in my mind, I somewhat associate it with the feminine aspects of the female goat, not the satyr goat, but, there is a feminine aspect to Pesach lamb, that you could eat a female goat or a male lamb.
Right.
So I just associate it with that. I think it's really cool. It shows how they work together.
Yeah, it's amazing when you turn to Mizmowr 103, and Dowd is expressing that his nepesh soul is going to endure this, and then he asks us a bunch of questions about where our salvation comes from. But when he speaks for his soul, it's a she. So she is doing this, she is doing that, just as ʕyâlûth is the feminine of Iyal. The OWTH ending is the special feminine ending for this kind of a masculine noun to make it feminine. So it is his feminine counterpart, if you will. And what is Dowd's feminine counterpart, of course, is his soul. And the Ruach Kodesh is feminine. So in this particular case, it's far more appropriate to apply this title and name to the Ruach Kodesh, who he'd be talking to, because his soul was going to endure this. It was the Ruach Kodesh who was going to bail him out and support him. And he had been anointed in the Ruach Kodesh at 8 years old. And we were told that the Ruach Kodesh never departed from him during his first life. Well, she was about to do so here, although her departure would be quite brief. So just as the Hebrew language was embodied with the unique capability of limiting or extending the action of a verb over time with the perfect or imperfect conjugations, it was endowed with the ability to express volition in first, second, or third person. Something else that's occurring here. And here, as before, we find that minimizing Dowd's tenure in Sheol is his will and God's choice, his desire and Yahweh's decision. This is something that Dowd requested and Yahweh approved. Dowd's sacrifice, apart from Yahweh's support and approval, is meaningless. It's a gruesome thing. It doesn't accomplish anything. And so they had to work together as father and son for this to prevail. So obviously Dowd wanted his time away and his confinement in the lightless realm of Sheol to be limited. And he realized that, because realistically, he's going there to deposit our guilt.
Right.
Let's go in, let's deposit the guilt, let's come out. And he's, by the way, going to take his own. And oh, by the way, as I think I shared with our listeners last week, that my conclusion that he negotiated with Yahowah to take Absalom's guilt as well, so that the son of the son could be absolved of his bad choices, is affirmed in the, I think it's the third Mizmowr that specifically was written to say, that's what he did, and who could blame him? This was a big ask for a man and for his God, and so pretty much you're the only person that can perform this mission, because Dowd was Yahweh's firstborn, so he's the only one that can perform Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim. And since Yahowah had promised Abraham, who was there proving that he was committed to the covenant, ready to sacrifice his son, and Yahowah says, no, I'm going to provide the lamb, inferring that he's providing his son, Dowd's it. So Yahowah needed Dowd to do this. Dowd needed to do this. So they were in a position where, Dowd realistically could have asked the sun, moon, and the stars.
Also, how much like Yahowah is that to choose your son, your people, over all others?
Yes.
Yoab rightfully told him, you'd be fine if we were all dead, if Absalom could be here. And Dowd was probably thinking, yeah, you're right. I think that who wouldn't choose their own son?
Yeah, I think it's also very much like Moshe, not as personal, but when Yahowah wanted to go and liberate his people from Mitzrayim, Moshe was it. There were no other choices. And so either Moshe said yes or God was stymied in terms of his ability to act, because he always acts through people. There's only one person on the planet who's qualified to do it, Moshe. Well, in this case, only one person on the planet that's qualified to do this, Dowd. But in Dowd's case, rather than Yahowah coming to him and pleading with him to do this, it's just the opposite. Dowd comes up with this decision. It's very clear. That's what we read throughout, where he says in first person, using the cohortative, this is my decision. This is what I want. Matter of fact, in the 20th Mizmowr that I'm translating right now, Dowd is talking about, I came up with this idea. This was my justification for it, and Yahowah approved it. So it actually is the same discussion, the opposite. So Dowd was in and should have been, in a position where he could have requested most anything. And I think in this particular case, it's just Yahowah's nature to say, if you're willing to commit to helping me and my people, to work with me for the benefit of my people, you can trust me to give you much more than you provide. It is so difficult to find someone who is qualified and willing to work with me on in this way, that if you are, you need to know that what I'm going to give to you is going to infinitely exceed what you provide for me and my people. And I think Dowd knew that. And of course, he gets the inheritance of the firstborn. He's inheriting a favored slice of the universe, and God's anointing him as the leader of his people forevermore. And the thing that Dowd really got out of this is the respect of his people. When people are so impressed by what you have done that they're broken down to tears when they see you, then you can be assured you've earned their respect. And that's what Zechariah 12 is all about. Dowd earned his people's respect to the point of weeping. Єyâlûth, pronounced Єyâlûth, is being used as a divine title. It's very similar to Elohim, although now in conjunction with the set-apart spirit. This proper noun appears this one time in the Navi. Єyâlûth is the feminine form of El, as we've discussed, and is the power behind the Passover lamb. It's the power behind the ability to open the doorway to heaven. The name reveals that our spiritual mother is El, devoted to providing us with the ability to do whatever is required, empowering us such that we benefit from the Pesach El and find our way home to Yah. On this day, she would abandon the dying body and then escort the surviving soul from Pesach to Matzah, where it would go from bad to worse. And she did so, taking his soul from Jerusalem to Sheol to fulfill unyeasted bread, taking our collective guilt along with him. Once there, she would observe from the outside for the ensuing 24 hours of Matzah, remaining vigilant and prepared to aid and abet Dowd's release. Thereupon, she would envelop Dowd's nepesh and empower him, preparing him for his return in conjunction with firstborn children. Yahowah has consistently called his set-apart spirit the Ruach Kodesh, which means set-apart spirit. Because Ruach is a feminine noun, this reveals that Yah's spirit represents God's maternal nature. And by being Kodesh, we know that our spiritual mother is set apart from Yahowah to serve us in similar ways. That is to say, she comes from Yah, that she is part of Yah, and that she is set apart from Yah for our benefit. Dowd, by the way, is the most set apart. Knowing this, Dowd is confirming his rendezvous with the set-apart spirit, affirming that the ʕyâlûth will be there to liberate his soul from the black hole of Sheol when the job is done. Mizmowr song, Psalm 22:20. It is my desire and your will, my choice and yours, to deliver my soul, to snatch away and save my soul from the horror, the heat, the desolation and ruin, my unique position as son and precious life as the firstborn child, from the influence of the contemptible scum and abased yelpers. The only part of the Messiah deployed during the fulfillment of Chag Matzah was Dowd's nepesh soul, and it would be snatched out of Sheol, liberated and saved by Yahweh's Ruach Kodesh. On this, father, mother, and son were in full agreement. By rescuing Dowd's consciousness, Bikurim was now possible. The firstborn son would lead the way home, expecting us to follow. It is apparent that the abased yelpers who hounded Dowd during Pesach as he was being flailed alive were demonic and anticipated in Sheol. Although there is another possibility. The Hebrew word for dog, kâlêb, is a compound of kol, all, and leb, heart, and it suggests that those who were being so abusive, barking and snipping at the Messiah, are feelers, not thinkers. Religious rather than rational. They were all heart and no head. And clearly when Dowd got into trouble, it was his heart that led him astray, not his head.
Mm-hmm.
There is another crime which must be exposed. The Masoretes vocalized the textual consonants CHRB as chereb rather than choreb. The former is a knife, dagger, sword, axe, or chisel. Since Dowd's Passover ordeal, and I'm marking something here because we've got to go back and make a correction, but since Dowd's Passover ordeal included whipping and the piercing torment of crucifixion, if the prophetic passage was changed to represent a plea to be spared from cutting implements, Dowd's prophetic credentials and subsequent sacrifice would be disqualified, as it would not fit these predictions. Not knowing any better, the politically motivated clerics who prepared the King James Version punctuated this mistake. And since then, the ASV, NIV, NKJV, and NASB are more revisions than new translations, and they replicated the error. The King James Version is published, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling, from the power of the dog." They came up with my darling by including Yakid, only child, which was scribed after kâlêb, evil yelpers, rather than making it part of the next statement. The New American Standard Bible, which claims to be literal, reads, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my only life from the power of the dog." New Living Translation decided to ignore nepesh soul altogether, which was the most important word in the statement. "Save me from the sword, my precious life from these dogs." Correctly rendered, the passage is prophetic, and it is also historically accurate, informative, and important. The set-apart spirit was tasked with the responsibility of retrieving Dowd's soul from the desolate and lifelessness of Sheol, recruiting him from its horrible heat, as well as something that is part and parcel of the event horizon of a black hole. Therefore, long before we're introduced to the concept of a black hole, we find some of its attributes depicted in this text. It is a horrible, ruinous place of complete destruction, subject to intense heat. This experience is further detailed in Mizmowr Psalm 88. Collectively, this is the who, the when, the how, the why behind the fulfillment of the first three Mikra. Yahowah, Dowd, and the set-apart spirit were in one accord, all committed to establishing the covenant family. And they knew that he would not be incarcerated longer than was necessary. This is now Mizmowr song, Psalm 22:21. And for those that are trying to follow along in the Jewish Publication Society, their Tanakh, it's always one verse higher. So it says 22:22 for them. You want to liberate and save me, to rescue and deliver me. This is God's desire. Out of the mouth of the fearsome and destructive beast, and from the horns of the bull representing the flashing light that has risen on high, you have answered me during my affliction. So this is our second encounter with that fearsome beast that was mentioned earlier in the Mizmowr. But this time we learn a little more about him. He is comprised of light and is yet horned and flashy. He seeks a degree of adulation only the highest status would bring. And he is often presented in the guise of a bull. Now this would make the destructive beast none other than Hasatan. Taking this one step further, while Yada Yah is often translated lion, it is clearly symbolic in this refrain. This vicious predator maims its prey, also telling. Yada Yah forms the basis of Aridatha, a name of Babylonian origin, which identifies the founder of the Babylonian mystery religion. Satan, we are told, in Yeshayahu 14 would rise out of Babylon. We would not be surprised that the most common symbol for Babylon's god was a winged lion. The gates of Babylon were adorned with them. So Dowd uses Yada Yah in the 7th Mizmowr as a pseudonym for Satan's alliance with Sheol, an especially fearsome beast, and that he was prophetic of the wannabe apostle, Sheol, known to Christians as Paul. He wrote, Yahowah, my God, in you I find a trusted and safe place, with you delivering me from all of my pretentious pursuers, especially from the boisterous who are verbally cantankerous against me. You are preserving me for a later time, or otherwise in the manner of a fiercely destructive being, a vicious beast of prey, Yada Yah, he, to satiate his own cravings, will rip apart my soul, snatching it away and shredding it without sparing it. This is symbolically then explaining why Dowd used that term in the 22nd Mizmowr. He had already defined it in the 7th Mizmowr. We're dealing with Hasatan. Hasatan, by the way, is a major player as it relates to Dowd. Much of Ezekiel, which is Hasatan's autobiography and playbook, is written specifically to denounce Dowd. As a matter of fact, when the corporeal incarnation of Satan enters Jerusalem in the last 3 years of the time of Jacob's troubles, he celebrates with the Feast of the Beast. And during the Feast of the Beast, Dowd is on the menu. It's a cannibalistic affair where Dowd's flesh and his blood are consumed in this mock celebration of satanic horror. So the adversary is primarily adversarial to Dowd, because the adversary knows that if he can undermine what Dowd has achieved, he can prevail. If he undermines Dowd, there is no Yom Kippurim because Dowd is returning with Yahowah to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. If he eliminates, he can't eliminate, if he precludes Jews from appreciating Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, there is no hope for salvation. There is no remnant that would be waiting for his return. So the primary victim of Hasatan's plan and his wrath is Dowd. He can't go against God. And so his hope is that he can so fool the people about what Dowd has done that he will ultimately prevail. Not going to happen that way. And we're part of the reason that it won't happen that way.
For sure. You know, I never really understood. Oh, go ahead, Kirk.
No, I mean, but that I would surmise that Dowd, number one, has to love Yada. Oh, he must look down and go, wow, I like this guy. And secondly, well, I know you may, well, oh, no. But yes. And the other thing is Hasatan has to hate the heck out of this. I mean,
yes.
I can't imagine he wouldn't be working every way.
I think it's true.
That's what we're up against. But we got Yah on us, so
I think it's true that, and I think that. But fortunately, the story of Job and of Satan saying, he's only says nice things about you because you've given him everything he could ever want to have, and give me a little time with him, and he'll turn on you. That story is ridiculous and not true.
Okay, good.
It's a complete myth. So this idea of Satan somehow negotiating with God, he says, okay, I know you had to stoop to a goy to serve as your last witness because there was nobody among your people that was willing to do it. But and this guy, I know he's trying really hard. He wrote in all these books and everything else, and I genuinely hate him. But he's only doing it because you've given him everything. He's got this beautiful place to live and a beautiful wife and a wonderful family and just
all these
huge, wonderful, loving support for this mission that you've sent him on. Let me take that away from him, along with all of your seven spirits that are empowering and supporting him, and he'll be a blubbering idiot like everybody else. Well, Yahowah's not going to tolerate that for a second. I mean, he set this whole thing up to achieve the result that he wanted, which was his people to be awakened to what Dowd had done for them, so that they could come home and that there would be a reception on Yom Kippurim. So why would Yahowah entertain allowing Satan to thwart that plan?
Not to mention, without Yahowah, none of us are great. So it's
so
it's kind of
not
a moot
prayer
challenge.
in the world that he's going to allow that to occur.
Right.
And so no, we're not concerned about it. But clearly, if Hasatan were allowed to disrupt what we're doing, he would.
Sure.
I
never understood why Satan was so insane to go up against Yahowah, because it's just. And now I realize it's not Yahowah he's trying to defeat. It's Dowd. Mm-hmm. And it makes more sense to me about the nature of Hasatan.
Yeah. So, Hasatan is going to find willing participants, like, Akiba was one, Muhammad was one, Paul of Christian fame was one. Yeah. Adolf Hitler was certainly one. He's going to find his stooges that he's going to make feel like they're enlightened and that they're powerful and everything else. They'll sell their soul to him, and he will work through them, and through confusion and counterfeit and the like, he will do everything he can to dissuade people from recognizing that Dowd fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, leading to Shabuah, and that Dowd will fulfill Kapporim when he returns. And so he doesn't need to thwart us because he's doesn't have any access, but he absolutely has access to the religious and the political, and that's his agenda, because if he can confuse enough people, his hope is that there won't be anybody there for Kappurim, and if there's nobody there looking up to Yahowah and mourning over Dowd, then Yahowah won't return, and he can continue to torment people here on the earth to the cows come home. So that is his strategy. To ward off this beast, we have a very effective tool. It's Yahowah's Anah testimony. His response provides us with the answer we need. Since many Hebrew words have a light and dark side, let's consider an entirely different approach to the concluding statement in Mizmowr Psalm 22:21. It can read, "And so, from the brilliant light of this summit, which lifts on high, you have answered me during my affliction." This is an equally justifiable translation. So you can read it, "You want to liberate and save me, to rescue me and deliver me out of the mouth of the fearsome and destructive beast, and from the horns of the bull representing the flashing light that has risen on high, you have answered me during my affliction." Perfectly legitimate translation of those words. But as I say, since Hebrew words have a dark and light side, those same words can be rendered, "And so, from the brilliant light of this summit which lifts on high, you have answered me during my affliction." Koren, which speaks of brilliant light, is exactly the term that Yahowah used when describing the horns of the sacrificial Pesach El, the substitute lamb that was available for Abraham and Yitzhak on Moriah, exactly 40 Yobel prior to this time. So I actually prefer the latter rendering, because it not only addresses the location where this occurs, but it speaks of the Spirit's response. It also serves to connect this portion of the prophecy with that which occurred on Moriah, as I mentioned, 2,000 years earlier, when Koren was used to depict the radiant nature of the Lamb Yahowah promised to provide at this time. So staying focused on this amazing piece of inspired literature, no matter how they are rendered, the last four words of the 21st lyric are the most important and the least understood: Men, Koren, Ram, and Anah. The JPS Tanakh, based upon the Masoretic text, conveys, "From the horns of the oxen rescues me." Changing answers to rescues, because otherwise the verse would turn God into the ox's horns. The New American Standard Bible gets Anah correct, but then commits a similar crime, rendering the passage, "From the horns of the wild oxen you answer me," which has God riding the wild oxen. The American Standard Version adds a yea, but otherwise reads like its descendant. The NIV, which is always fun, dropped the reference to answering Anah and replaced it with save Yasha. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. More creative still, the KJV, ignoring two of the four words and convoluting the others, translates, "For thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns." That must be proof for the Christians that unicorns actually exist.
Yeah.
You just can't make this stuff up. So
No.
now, so that we don't add to the stench, although I am told that unicorns poop glitter, so it probably wouldn't smell all that bad.
All children know that.
Let's start over.
Gosh.
Anah can convey something positive or negative, depending on the context. Yeah. It is typically rendered to answer, to respond, to testify, or to reply, providing testimony as a witness. At the other extreme, if addressing what Dowd would endure on this day, Anah can be seen as affliction or humiliation.
Yeah.
It's important for words to have this dark and light side, because if you don't acknowledge what Dowd has done for you, then your soul will be afflicted and humiliated as his was on this day. But if you respond correctly and answer to his testimony, then your soul will not. So it's one of these beautiful terms that you get out of it what you see in it. Anah, however, does not mean save or rescue. You just can't get there. But what it does mean is important. God responds to those who seek him and who are willing to rely upon him. And since Ani was scribed in second person, it reads, you answered me. No, Yahowah was not riding on the horns of a wild ox. Karen, as we have learned, has a wide range of definitions. It speaks of shining, being radiant, emitting and sending out brilliant rays of light supernaturally. Karen's horn symbolism can denote a desire for power and authority over a kingdom, and at times can mean flashy. As noted previously, Yahowah uses Karen in the same place and in the same phrase of Abraham's dress rehearsal for the Passover sacrifice. Speaking of the sacrificial lamb that was substituted by Yahowah, God said he had shining horns of radiant light. Brilliant flashing rays of light similar to lightning from a supernatural source, symbolic of power, status, and might, a trumpet for signaling a message, and was the summit of a mountain. Boy, all of those things apply to Dowd.
Yeah.
Right.
It does start with a quaff.
Go ahead.
You know, I say it does start with a quaff to begin with, so I would go to the light first.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's on the horizon line, so that would be the first place I would look. And then the rest of them are all there too.
Yeah, the Kappo is almost always depicted as the rising sun. It's the sun on the horizon. Of course, it could be the rising sun or the setting sun. But as Hebrew reads from right to left, and in standing in Israel from right to left, you would have the rising sun before the setting sun. And so to be the rising sun, it's the increase in light. It is a new day, a time of enlightenment, a time of life, is the inference of the Kof. So you are correct. The lead letter in the word takes you there. But Karen, all three letters are wonderful together. The Kof is increased enlightenment. The Rosh is for an observant person, regarding the Nun, which is the sun, the start of new life.
Yeah, the child.
So, we're talking about
that's where I
Dowd.
go with it. Yeah, first.
We're talking about Dowd again. No matter how you turn, it's that story. And listen, I realize now, and this is going to be true forevermore. Once upon a time, I came to recognize, this is probably now 10 years ago, that the Son of God and the Messiah was Dowd. And I corrected every reference to Yada Yah and made it very clear that Yahowah is exceedingly clear that his Son and his Messiah is Dowd, not the misnomer that has been the basis of a competitive anti-Semitic religion. It's Dowd. And when I began to proclaim that and how important Dowd was to our relationship with Yahowah as the exemplar of the covenant, more than half of those who had listened to these programs back over 10 years ago and read the books had a conniption fit. I was really slandered a lot, saying that I had fallen in love with and I had a bromance with Dowd. And we'd spend a lot of time during the coming home period and while completing observations, speaking of this transformation and the realization that Dowd is the central character in God's story.
Yeah.
That is nothing compared to the realization that Dowd is the person who volunteered to fulfill
to do this.
Isaac Matzah Bakurim, leading to Shabuah, of which we proclaimed during Teruah about his return on Kapporim to be the king forevermore of Sukkah. His soul is the implement fulfilling the Moed Mikre. The Moed Mikre is the lone path that Yahowah has provided to
restore,
to give us the benefits of the covenant, eternal life, being perfected, being adopted into his family, being enriched and empowered. These are essential things, and the realization that Yahowah, through the prophet Yada Yah, through Zechariah, and vociferously through Dowd and the Mizmowr, laid this all out for us to tell us that Dowd was going to perform this role, is going to preoccupy our message. It's going to be the dominant theme. And every place that it turns up and every place that it's affirmed, we're going to share. And so the intensity to which we are going to focus on Dowd is going to grow. It is essential to God's people for them to know they can do away with this whole myth of a Jesus Christ. And for them to know that not only was Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim fulfilled, but it was fulfilled by Dowd. That the Messiah that they're awaiting is the Messiah who has been here twice before. That they can relax and know that the man who was so effective defending them will defend them again. But he not only will defend them, he'll save them. And that the entire story of the covenant and the fulfillment of the Mikre is based on what Father and Son have done together. It is such a perfect picture. It is so wonderful. It's wonderful to the point of tears for Yisra'el. So be prepared. That is what we're going to be talking about. That's what we're going to be sharing. That is Yahowah's message to his people. It's not only Dowd who is calling them home, it's Dowd who enables the means for them to come home.
Yes.
And all of us who are there when Yahowah returns with Dowd on Yom Kippurim in 2033, year 6000 Yah, all of us will be there because he did this.
Right.
The most heroic and compassionate act in human history. And it's been totally denied and degraded by Judaism and Christianity, to the point that there aren't 1 in 10 million people that currently know this. Now, in having recently translated the Mizmowr that formed the first 7 chapters of Coming Home 1, which, maybe in the next few weeks we will finish and get back on the bookshelf in its rewritten form. But Dowd is very enthusiastic. He and Yahowah both say that they are celebrating the harvest, that they are delighted with the number and the quality of people who will be there for Kapporim. So we will prevail. We don't, I've felt that we all had to redouble our efforts to keep Satan from prevailing and having a queen's sweep, because so few Yehudim, Jews, and Yisra'el were coming to this realization that the only ones that had come to this realization are those who have been part of our company for some time and have learned through DNA tests that they are Jewish. And being Jewish has all to do with your ethnicity and nothing to do with your religiosity.
Right.
And so we recognize that a homecoming in Jerusalem for Yahowah and Dowd is only possible if God continues to empower what we're doing and we prevail. And Dowd has said it very succinctly and powerfully in his Mizmowr that looking forward to that date, that they're very happy with the quality of the harvest, and they're singing songs about those that Father and Son have saved. So be there. Be among those who are there. Life is better in every possible way. The sooner you make the decision, the better, because time is running out. We have 10 years left under the most optimistic of circumstances. What I mean by that is that a very high percentage of the world's population is not going to survive the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And so if you don't survive it, but you made this choice to accept Dowd for what he has done for you and embrace Father and Son in this covenant relationship as they fulfill the Moed Mikre and celebrate them and answer these invitations to meet with God, then no matter what happens to your body, your soul will survive it. So you can take out, remove all the sting of what's going to happen during the time of Yaakov's troubles simply by embracing what Father and Son have done. It is a wonderful story to see how they are of like mind and how they are offering this to their people. And if you're a Yehud, take advantage. Do so quickly. Devote the time. Your soul is worth it. So that's probably a pretty good place for us to stop. We can resume this chapter next week. It is a wonderful learning experience. There's a lot of items in the news we did not cover. Maybe we'll cover them next week. But I did want to get back to this story because it is the most amazing story ever told. Yeah, if there ever was a father and son story.
It's a lead story.
Yeah, and it's all there. It's just like while Adam is not called a son of God, their relationship is very much like father and son. And while Noah isn't called the son of God, Yahweh's relationship with him is very much like father and son. And of course, on the ark, Noah would have his sons. And while Dowd is the one person who is referred to under this father and son label, the covenant is based upon father and son, which is why with Abraham, even though his name means merciful father, and Abraham is clearly Yahweh's friend, not his son, it's still a father and son relationship, and he would create that covenant relationship by allowing Abraham and Sarah to give birth to Yishak. But the whole story, all the way through, is father and son, and then Yishak having Jacob is his son, and of Jacob having the 12 sons that would become the 12 tribes of Yisra'el. It is a father and son story all the way through, and then when you get to Dowd himself, he becomes the one person who is named, he is my son, I am his father. He is the one person whom Yahowah calls out and said, he is my firstborn. And all of the things that he said about the covenant, all the things from the Garden of Eden through the ark of the flood, through the formation of the covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, all of it comes full circle with Dowd, serving as the Son of God, as Father and Son work together to save their people and to enable the covenant family. It is as Moshe would provide the framework with his words, Dowd would live it with his life. Well, we've reached the end of our program. I want to thank you both for being part of this. It's a pretty exciting material.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's a wonderful thing to be able to celebrate what Father and Son have done, a wonderful awakening opportunity for Yisra'el, for God's people, and a wonderful celebration for Father and Son. They've gone a long time without having been able to celebrate what they achieved together. Yah was very proud of his son, and should be.
There's been no witnesses.
Yeah, and Dowd's proud of what he accomplished, and should be. And so many people could benefit if they'd only know. And so I think that beyond any question, this is the greatest discovery of all time, the one that has the most value for those who embrace it. And we're offering it free. We're proving its legitimacy, and we're inviting you to share it with us. The greatest treasure in human history. Well, thank you so much. Enjoyed being with you this evening, and with Perky D, I hope you feel better. I know you've struggled from another bout with COVID, but don't worry, because the World Health Organization says that the threat of COVID is over. So can tell those little boogers that
they
don't exist.
That who says go away. I'm actually quite convinced that COVID is going to be with us right to the very end. That it continues to mutate. The numbers of cases in China has blossomed again. I think that the issue that WHO and the National Institute of Health in America are clueless about is that long ago people stopped being tested. So you can say, well, there's no great growth, but we all have now home tests. There's no reason for to be tested otherwise, and no one is taking a home test is reporting it because there's nothing anybody's going to do for you. But the number of people that have COVID is probably greater now than any time in the history of this disease. And this bugger, it has really some nasty lingering effects. And so while it's not lethal for most people, it's still probably in the flu range and 1 in 1,000. It has lots of terrible legacy effects. The last time I had it, it was excruciating headaches for a long period of time. Leia's had it a third time also, and while she had the headaches, a lot of other things that has an effect on her immune system. It's had different effects on you this last time, Dee. So for those who have it, I'm sorry. It is the gift of the Chinese lab accident that went awry, and it's mankind has made a terrible blunder, and we're going to pay for it right to the very end. And I'm convinced that there'll be other pandemics.
Probably.
Along with it, although man's most deadly and debilitating pandemics are
religion,
are comprised of religious words, political words, religious words, the kind of things that's infecting Yisra'el right now, and they're going to get much worse. Well, anyway, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you next week. As always, may Yah bless. Happy Shabbat to one and all. Good night.
Shabbat shalom, y'all. Night.
Happy Shabbat. Good night.